Good afternoon. I'm Chris Cooney with the Metro South Chamber of Commerce. Welcome back. This is our sixth installment of this COVID recovery phone call, Zoom call that we've been doing each Friday at 2 o'clock. We're going to get a little bit into going forward to work and not back to work. I got that from Senator Spilka, who spoke on Monday with the Boston Chamber, and I was part of that. And she was talking about going forward to work, not back to work, meaning the work world is going to be different. We're going to go into a new normal, as people say, but many people are beginning to think of it as kind of an exciting time with more technology, more innovation, more safety overall as we return. So we're going to hear from the U.S. Chamber on a little bit about that, as well as city, state, and federal officials. We've got folks from the mayor's office. The mayor will be here, as well as Mass Office of Business Development. We're happy to welcome our representatives back, as well as from the Small Business Administration. They will join us as well. We have more than 100 people expected on this call today. I'm going to remind you that if you have a question, there's a Q&A section down the bottom of the screen. Just please put your question in there. We'll ask the panelists to answer them as they are available to do so. And at the end, if we don't get to some of them, then we'll distribute them and try to get you an answer in a short time frame. We're delighted to have with us Ron Eidshaug from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. The U.S. Chamber is based, as many of you know, in the United States capital, Washington, D.C., and is the largest lobbying organization in the United States. The Metro South Chamber of Commerce is one of the founding members of the United States Chamber of Commerce. Believe it or not, the Brockton area Board of Trade started back in the 1850s, and the U.S. Chamber recently turned 100. So there were many large industrial areas that got together to form the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And we are voluntarily accredited by the U.S. Chamber. We're accredited with 5 stars, one of the very few, less than 200 nationally at that level. And we're proud to have achieved that level of recognition. So before we hear from Ron, I would like to invite some updates from, I think, MOBD, since you're on the call already. And I just see that SBA has joined us, Susan and Eli as well. So who wants to go first, Margaret or Susan?
I'm happy to go first. It's fine. Mine are pretty brief.
Okay, great.
Okay, so I'm going to be giving you the updates on workforce development. I just heard from Secretary Rosalind Acosta. They've issued a report yesterday on some unemployment facts and figures. So as you're all, I'm sure, well aware, there's a record level volume of unemployment claims. From just the first week of opening, April 19th through April 25th, there were over 70,000 traditional UI claims. From March 15th to the present, over 722,000 traditional UI claims. Some of the leading sectors they're seeing these unemployment claims are from food and accommodations, retail trade, healthcare, and social assistance. And through the CARES Act, there's also an offering of pandemic unemployment assistance, or PUA. And that was what was created to help those individuals who are typically not eligible to collect traditional unemployment assistance, those people who are self-employed or receive 1099s or gig workers. And from April 19th to April 26th, they had over 171,000 PUA claimants. And the total claimants from March 15th to April 25th for both traditional UI and PUA claimants were over 838,000, which resulted in over $2.3 billion in disbursements over a 5-week period.
Wow.
So there's just a lot of funding going out to support this. The Department of Unemployment Assistance started with a staff of 50 employees, which has now grown to over 1,200 customer service agents. They're handling over 25,000 inbound and outbound calls a day. They're also continuing to host virtual town halls in English and Spanish, and over 200,000 people have currently attended those virtual town halls since March 22nd. And it is one thing to note that our online system for submitting your claims has not had any issues considering the amount of demand that's been placed on the system, which is very fortunate, as many other states have had their systems crash and now they're resorting to paper claims. So that's just another sort of a shout out to our system, and that we've been able to manage and maintain this volume. It's pretty unbelievable. So that's the update from the unemployment and the workforce development standpoint.
That's great, Susan. Now you were just on the call with the Lieutenant Governor and the Secretaries for Labor and also Housing and Economic Development. Anything else that we could expect? Do you know what the governor is talking about right now at 1:30, or what he just?
Go ahead, Margaret. Good. I think, do you have any insight onto that?
Yep, sure. So actually, we did not have the Lieutenant Governor on the call today because of timing conflicts with the governor address. And I will say the Baker administration and Lieutenant Governor Polito every single day are live for an hour. They post it in the morning, mass.gov. You can check for daily updates, and they'll give you an advance of when to tune in to their announcement. So unfortunately, it's been coinciding with this one. I think the hot topic that's on everybody's mind right now is about reopening the economy. And I think what's really important is that we are not, the advisory order has been extended to May 18th. It is not necessarily that the Baker and Polito administration is looking at a date certain. They've been very clear that they are watching the healthcare data to drive their decisions. They have put together an advisory board to focus on reopening the economy and what's needed. And I'm going to post in the chat link, the link to where they are accepting input online. They're accepting it regionally. It's going to be very strategic. We want to make sure that every stakeholder's voice is heard. We'll be doing listening sessions. You know, myself and Sue are available if you have some concerns. You want to talk to us to make sure that they're communicated to the administration. We're accepting input online. The advisory board will be doing some listening sessions as well. So I think just, let's focus on a date certain, because the advisory board is going to be putting together a report with guidelines, and we will have that information and we will communicate that to you as soon as it is received. So I know there's a lot of anxiety about what is going to be needed, how are we going to source things, if we're going to be needed with PPE. I believe the governor today had talked about, wearing masks and wearing them outside, as businesses are concerned about what they need to keep their staff safe. And Secretary Keneally today, made a very important point. A question was asked from the chamber, one of the chambers, about, hey, we need advance notice. We just can't hit go. We need to be able to work through what we need. And they very much recognize the anxiety. And I think people are looking at May 18th, and that's where what's stuck in people's minds a little bit is that that's that date and I need to be ready and I don't know what I need. And so the guidance is not May 18th. We're putting together this advisory board. We're working through the mechanics and the logistics. We want to hear from you what your concerns are. And, there was a comment on the call about Merrimack Valley and being on the border of New Hampshire and how that impacts them. And, regionally with the regional strategy, obviously the Cape has a lot of anxiety with the tourist economy. So please note that's exactly the input that we're looking for. We want to make sure all of your voices are heard, and we are here. Sue and I are on these calls every week, or at least one of us are with you every week to make sure that we are hearing for you and we are advocating for you. I know another point that I've been working with a lot of communities on, it came up on the call as well, and it's been a trending topic, is the CDBG funds that have been released with the latest version of the CARES Act. I believe Brockton is an entitlement community and should be getting their funds directly, but maybe some of the other communities within the Metro South caption area are not. We have not, the Commonwealth has not received the guidance on what we're going to be able to utilize those funds for to support businesses, but stay tuned. We are very anxiously awaiting that answer of the question. And glad to answer any questions as well as we go through the panel and be a resource for you. Sue and I, we are always available. Our cell phones, our emails, we're the human that is going to get you the answer. If we don't have it, we're going to have internal contacts and expedite it for you. And for the callers joining us this week, one of them put in the chat, can you put a picture up as a background instead of to change things up a little bit. So I live on the water in Quincy Bay, and this is a view of sunrise at my home. And something I am very excited about, I think, didn't we talk about Netflix last week or something? This is something I'm particularly excited about is boating season. My husband's been cleaning the basement, but I've been excited about getting the boat ready, which is on his to-do list and not mine. But the state did issue boating guidance. So any boaters who are on the call today, they're, the yacht clubs and marinas are preparing for what can be a safe boating season for you. And that state guidance has been posted on the website. So that was a little bit of good news of how can I socially distance, be out in the boat, enjoying the outdoors in a safe manner, and how that would work for the summer. So happy to answer any questions on that. It's one of my favorite hobbies today.
That's great, Margaret. Thank you so much, you and Susan. I just wanted to reiterate that they're both with the Massachusetts Office of Business Development. So they work for Secretary Keneally, who is on the cabinet of the governor, and service our region. And Margaret's background is of Quincy Bay, I believe, because she's a former city councilor from Quincy. And Susan had worked in the workforce development agency for years in the state. So she's really very knowledgeable on the unemployment issues that are underway here. So if you have any questions for either of them, please write them in the Q&A and we will answer them. They also have been very busy after these calls. They tell me with follow-ups, so please reach out to them. I think their information is also down in the Q&A section. Margaret brought up May 18th, and that is an important distinction. Some of our businesses think we're going back to work the 18th. I think what the governor said is they're issuing some study results on the 18th, which tells me usually in that government speak that study will be released that day, and I'm sure before that they're going to make a determination whether this extends to a week later or 2 weeks or whatever that's going to be. So I don't want people to get too far ahead of themselves. With that said, I was on several calls this week, and people were talking about the advantage that Massachusetts has in one sense because a lot of other states are going back, and so there's some good modeling out there, some good best practices and whatnot, and I think we're going to hear a little bit about that from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I also want to remind you this call is recorded, so if there's something that you missed or you want to go back to, it'll be posted on the Chamber's website later on today or early Monday, depending on the volume and what's going on. And I also just want to acknowledge some of our promotion partners, the Avon Industrial Park Association, the Bridgewater Business Association, Brockton Area NAACP, the Campello Business Association, the Cape Verdean Association, the Haitians United, the Massachusetts Small Business Development Center, the Randolph Chamber of Commerce, the South Shore Women's Business Network, and the Stoughton Chamber of Commerce. So I want to thank all of them for promoting this weekly session. Again, I said this is the 6th week. I see the mayor has joined us. Mayor Robert Sullivan has been fantastic to work with. His communication has been key. He just helped facilitate a conversation with the new building inspector. I don't know if he's permanent or acting, but he was very thorough in his response. And he pretty much said, Brockton is open for business. We're here every day. If people need permits, tell them to come in or call us. We'll respond to every inquiry. And that's really good news, I think. So, Mayor, I also heard that there's some mobile testing space is opening up. So I'm going to turn it over to the mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Chris and Susan and Margaret. Again, 6 weeks has gone by awful fast, but it's been really awe-inspiring with the efforts you're doing, response you're doing. I'm getting calls on a regular basis from constituents just thanking for this standing call with the Chamber of Commerce and the SBA and all your efforts from the state level. The most difficult part of my job and saddest part of my job is every day at 4 o'clock, I get an update on numbers. And I have to report right now, 148 residents, 148 Brocktonians have passed away. That's the current death count, loss of life. And of course, our prayers and thoughts go out to the departed and their surviving loved ones. And current active cases in the city of Brockton, people in Brockton have positive current COVID cases is 2,357 with a total number calculated 2,834. So our numbers are still going up. I'll be very blunt about that. We haven't plateaued yet. We're hopeful in the near future we'll see that, but we're not there yet. But there's a wonderful effort, and it's really a catalyst for a wonderful improvement here in the city of Brockton. As we know, the governor and lieutenant governor have been great cheerleaders and partners here with MEMA and DPH. Increased testing came in last Tuesday at Brockton Neighborhood Health Center. And as I've shared in previous weeks, I have a standing call 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, with all the hospitals. And Brockton Neighborhood Health Center, Sue Joss, the executive director, and Kim Holland, the CEO at Signature Healthcare Brockton Hospital, came up with an idea to work together on how they could do increased testing capability. And I offered the parking lot at Brockton High School. And through the efforts of BEMA, Brockton Emergency Management, Board of Health, and MEMA and DPH, we're doing that. We did a test case today. It is actually a call and advanced hotline, and I'm going to give that number right now, 844-483-7819. It is for any essential worker in the city of Brockton, any essential worker, any person that has been exposed to COVID, and anybody that has symptoms. You call that number, and you're going to be able to pre-register. And it's going to be at Brockton High. It's going to be 2 tents, 1 tent dedicated to Brockton Neighborhood Health Center, 1 tent dedicated to Signature Brockton Hospital. And it's open 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday at 470 Forest Ave, which again is the address for Brockton High. And I'm just so proud of the collaborative efforts, everybody working together, rolling up the sleeves and getting the job done. So on a healthcare perspective, we're seeing that. And here on a business financial, we're seeing that through Chris and through Margaret and Susan and everybody at the SBA. So wanted to give you the updates. Sad news is the loss of life and people inflicted right now, but the good news is we're working diligently every hour of every day to get to a stagnant point and hopefully a decrease in short order.
Thank you, Mayor. And there may be some Q&A for you down below there. Again, thank you for your efforts. I know you are everywhere, and I've been on several calls with you this week and helping us with the building questions that we've had. It's really important to be clear with people. The city is open and the construction sites are being allowed to resume. I was in the city taking photos yesterday, and there's been some real progress on some of the major building going on Main Street, on Frederick Douglass Way there, and that's exciting. Also on the new residential 47 West Elm. So that's exciting too.
Well, the other thing I would just want to share is we've got a lot of inquiries, and Chris has really been at the forefront of this as well. And I want to thank him. He gets on a call every Wednesday that I have with all the business associations in Brockton and OCPC, Mary Waldron over there, and Sheila Sullivan Jordan from Workforce. So the question was, when are planning boards, ZBA, conservation hearings going to be starting? And my answer is this month in May. Today is May 1st. Happy May Day, everybody. It's going to be a different type. It's going to be virtual. It's going to be Zoom. I'm working with the solicitor's office, the law department right now. Did speak to the chairman of the License Commission, Hank Tataglia, yesterday to coordinate that. So we're going to take baby steps right now. They're going to be public meetings, not necessarily huge, butter type of hearings, but we're all in this together, and we're going to get it done. So just wanted to echo the sentiment shared by Chris, and Brockton is definitely open for business, and we're just taking baby steps to get it done the right way.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much. So we're delighted to have with us back this week Eli Speo and Susan Laurie from the Small Business Administration. This chamber has had a relationship with the SBA for more than 50 years, whereas we've hosted their local SCORE chapter. But we also have a strategic alliance with the SBA where Susan is in our office quite often and assisting businesses, and that's terrific. Eli, as many of you know, was involved with banking for many years, credit unions and commercial banking. He joined the SBA in 2015, and he's been the liaison with 150 lenders here in the state. And I asked him to just give an update in terms of some of the numbers. I was on a call with Bob Nelson not long ago, and he told me 16,538 EIDL advances have been approved for a total of $76 million. And the PPP at the time was 47,000 approved at $10.3 billion for the state of Massachusetts. That's pretty extraordinary. Eli, can you give us an update on what's going on?
Absolutely, Chris. And again, thank you for hosting us. Great to be part of this, webinar again. And I know many of the folks, just want to thank everybody for, first and foremost being here. I want to thank Margaret and Susan and the mayor for the update. I'm sure that you have seen some of the numbers I shared with you last time, but I do have a recent update. So my camera doesn't work, but I did add a photo on my presentation. So I'm just going to share my screen real quick here and the presentation for everybody. So I hope you can see it. That's our wonderful logo there. And let me move forward for a quick second here. So as you all know, we started taking applications for the second round of funding on Monday, April 27th. The latest update I have by the numbers is as of Wednesday, the 29th. We did have a slow start for Monday. I'm sure some of the lenders that are on the line, they're not in their heads. It was brutal. Monday was a tough day, for the program. Our system was sluggish. It was very slow, and unfortunately, we didn't come up with a resolution till very late that same day. So the next day, we realized what was the issue. We stopped accepting applications through what's called, automated robotic entries. So that seemed to have been the issue. So from Tuesday thereafter, we've been, lenders have been breezing through the system, getting those loan applications through, getting authorizations done, and everything's been working the way it should. But one thing people need to know is that the second round of funding does have a reserve $60 billion for smaller lenders and community banks. So the monies is intended for the underserved, the underbanked small businesses. It was meant so larger institutions did not provide all this funding to just a handful of businesses with large payrolls, with a large number of employees. So keep in mind, the program makes eligible any business with up to 500 employees, which is pretty remarkable. But again, I do have this quick report that I perhaps shared with you last week, and just want to go over those numbers. You mentioned this quickly, Chris. In Massachusetts, again, the volume of lending here in the state accounted for half of all the funding in New England. It's pretty remarkable when you think about it. We had, $20 billion, 800,000 in the New England region, 10.3, almost 10.4 billion were actually in Massachusetts alone. Almost 47,000 small businesses got funding through the first round. That's pretty remarkable. And again, just want to give a big shout out to the lenders, the lending community. Absolutely phenomenal work on the part of our banks here in the state. We currently have 159 state-based lenders that participate in the program, and they're doing, as of this morning, most of them are done with their pipeline. So all the loans that they had in their pipeline, they have submitted, they've gotten a loan authorization. It's remarkable. It truly is, especially considering the slow start on Monday morning. Again, this is part of the same presentation that we shared with you last week. But again, average loan size, $206,000 on the first round of funding. 74% of all the loans approved in the first round were for $150,000 or less. So again, small businesses did get, their fair share. By the units, they got the majority. By the dollars, not so, because obviously smaller loans. But we hear on the media that some large businesses have gotten funding. You can see here from the statistics, loans over $5 million only accounted for 0.27% of the total volume by units, right? By dollars, almost a little over 9%. So, but you probably, and everybody on the line heard the Secretary of the Treasury who said that loans over $2 million, okay, PPP loans, will be subjected to a full audit. So that's a new, update from this week. And the biggest update I've got is on this next slide. Truly phenomenal. I cannot express in words the gratitude we have for the lenders, the lending community. I said state-based, we've got 159 lenders. national banks, out-of-state banks, all various participants. We have over 458 lenders in the state. So nationally, this is the update I've got as of Wednesday evening. You see here, 960,000 loans approved nationally, $90 billion out of the $310 billion went in those first, 2.5 days, really. And you can see here, the small banks, the medium banks, they definitely led the way. Small banks with assets under $10 billion approved over 587,000 loans. About 61% of the volume, $43 billion for the smaller, community banks, credit unions. It's just phenomenal when you think about it. Do want to remind people that all these loans were manually entered, and we know that, banks do not have unlimited resources. So when you think about that volume of lending on a national level by the smaller, lending institutions, it truly is amazing. Again, medium-sized banks, $20 billion in volume, 206,000 units. So a lot of loans, a lot of small businesses are receiving their fair share of the Paycheck Protection Loan Program. Again, you can see here the larger banks. By the units, again, we've got, nationally about 400 extra lenders that are participating in the program, which is impressive by itself. But just an update for everyone, we're still at that $2 billion an hour burn rate. So in the first round of funding, that was pretty much the sweet spot. If my math is accurate, there's definitely a lot of funding left. And, math is an exact science. So if people have not submitted an application for the Paycheck Protection Loan Program, obviously, this is the time to do it. There's a lot of lenders, who are taking applications. I know there's a handful who are, just overwhelmed. They're working out on closing these loans. We did send out guidance that they must close within 10 business days. Okay, so people get their money. Small businesses get the funding they need to be liquid, to pay their employees, pay the expenses, and so on and so forth. So they're working on closing these deals. Again, some of the smaller institutions, they're counting in the thousands of units. Okay, so it's more than what they've done in years of lending. So keep that in mind. And but again, there's lots of lenders in the state who are taking applications from the general public. If you're having trouble to finding the lender, call me, call our office. We're just an added resource for you all. So that's that for me. And, I'm here to answer any questions that you guys may have.
Thank you, Eli. And thank you for that update. I know Susan Laura is also on the line and she's answering some of the questions. Just two quick follow-up. EIDL advances, we received many of those in this region. I was talking to a gentleman who had applied maybe the Friday of the first week and received funds on Sunday night or Monday morning here in the city, and then applied for a PPP and received those funds within 48 hours into his account. Is the EIDL link still live? It seems like it was refunded, but it doesn't seem like the link is open right now.
So the SBA is not accepting any new applications for the EIDL. I mean, we are certainly inundated with the first round of applications.
Okay, so the in the queue are still being considered then?
Absolutely. So you can imagine, there's 30 million small businesses in the nation. Every single state was a declared disaster, so every single business was eligible for an EIDL loan, and believe me, a lot of them did put in for it. So the Office of Disaster Assistance, they're still processing applications that they received. They're being processed on a first come, first served basis. The agency, I just want to share with everybody, fair is what we do and how we process things. So I've had people who have reached out to me saying, we have not gotten our application processed yet. We haven't received anything, no notifications. It's just it's just not your turn yet. There was a glitch in the system that, I want everybody to be aware. We are working with those specific small businesses that need to recertify, but guidance is in the way, and we're going to reach out to those businesses that were affected. All the rest of small businesses who applied using the streamlined process that I've shared with you guys in a couple of the presentations, everybody should be good to go. 4 to 6 weeks is now the turnaround time.
That's great news to hear.
Be patient.
One other question, some of the folks that received the PPP, you mentioned it, they were kind of advised to put those funds in a separate checking account and then draw them out as utilities are received or payroll amounts are needed to cover the payroll. Will that prevent them from a full-blown audit of their entire business?
Well, again, the secretary specifically, mentioned loans over $2 million for a full audit. Okay. But I don't think, not segregating, those funds is really a reason for either the IRS or the Treasury to audit anything. Okay. We haven't gotten any guidance of the sort, but we do recommend, we highly advise people to, to properly document the use of funds, whether it's the EIDL advance, whether it's the PPP loan, the economic injury disaster loan itself. Keep in mind the EIDL and the EIDL advance are for working capital needs. Individuals can have both loans, the EIDL and the PPP, if they're used for two separate reasons. They have to be distinct purposes for the use of funds. If the Paycheck Protection Loan Program is for payroll costs, then your EIDL loan can only be for working capital expenses excluding payroll. So people have to be mindful of it. The IRS, as a matter of fact, did publish some additional guidance on record keeping, and I'm going to share in the chat room the link to that. So yesterday they had some additional guidance directly from the IRS on that topic.
Okay, thank you. We'll look for that. So it is now my pleasure to introduce our special guest from the United States Chamber of Commerce, Ron Eidshaug. He's the Vice President of the U.S. Chamber's Congressional and Public Affairs Division. Ron helps oversee a team of 15 full-time Capitol Hill lobbyists. As I mentioned, the U.S. Chamber is the largest business lobbyist in the United States. Eidshaug has a unique ability to translate Washington speak into plain language that business people can understand. That is truly a wonderful asset and skill to have. He is the chief lobbyist for the U.S. Chamber on the topics of environment, energy, and regulatory reform. So we're really happy to have him here. He's been at the U.S. Chamber since 1999, so more than 20 years. He's a veteran. And Ron, we're delighted that you joined us today. Can you give us a little update on what's happening in plain language and kind of interpret that Washington, D.C. speak so that we can understand what's ahead for us as we look to go forward to work instead of back to work?
Yeah, sure. And I'll spend a little bit of time about what's happening sort of on the congressional end, and then I'll spend the most of the time talking about what we're doing, trying to figure out how the American business community is going to get back to work and some of the things that we're working on. As Eli was talking about, the PPP and the EIDL programs were plussed up. We think that's really important. The Senate comes back to town this coming week. The House will come back in a couple of weeks, and they're going to need to address some further things as we're still sort of in the crisis mode of the pandemic. There's some talk that the PPP could in fact run out again this coming week or the week after or something like that. We know that there's a big need out there. I think if you look at one thing, and I think Eli and his colleagues at SBA, folks at Treasury, folks in the administration, folks in the White House, and folks in Congress really, really deserve a lot of credit and thanks because of what they've been doing, not only to sort of run the programs, but also keep up with changes and problems. And when challenges arise, they've really done an incredible job of of responding to the times. I know it's easy to get frustrated with this, but I think if we've learned anything, it's really, really difficult for the government to spend $600 or $700 billion and get that money out the door to the people who need it. So, at the U.S. Chamber, our hats are off to Eli and his colleagues who have really, really done an incredible job. And I want you all to know just how proud we are of the work that you've done to really save small businesses. So, we're going to see what Congress is going to do. There's going to need to be more money. Congress is going to need to move from what we're dealing with just sort of in the crisis mode to move to the recovery mode. And when you think about returning to work, it's big, it's difficult, it's complicated, and maybe if we can put it in some buckets to sort of think about how we're going to deal with this. And so I sort of deal with this in three ways. We've got the known knowns, the known unknowns, and the unknown unknowns. So the known knowns, there's things that are going on that the administration, governors, communities are doing to get ready to go back to work. They're known, we know what they are. There's some known unknowns. There's some things that we need Congress or whoever, the administration, governors, the business community, there's some problems that we need to have solved. We don't know what those resolutions will be yet, but we know that we're going to have to figure out these problems and solve them. So those are the known unknowns. And then there's the unknown unknowns. There's these problems that are going to come up, and we're going to just have to do our best to address them. If we do what we can, working together as the business community, we're going to hopefully reduce some of that uncertainty, reduce some of those problems, but we all know that there's going to be problems that emerge. So what are the known knowns out there? What do we know that's already sort of in the pipeline? The administration has been good on this front. They've sort of given the message to the business community, come up with some best practices, work with your states, work with your local governments to try and deal with social distancing, temperature checks, sanitation in the workplace, disinfecting, closing high traffic areas, no business travel. None of this is rocket science. And at the very baseline, we've got some good stuff out there. The administration has been talking, how do we go back to work? And we're probably going to need to deal with this in phases. Right now, we're either in phase 0 or phase 1, depending upon where you live. When we get to phase 1, the vast majority of people are going to still be teleworking or not coming into the workplace. We're going to have a phased return to work. Small groups of people will probably come in over time. We're going to have some very, very strict social distancing in the workplace. We're going to keep common areas closed. Maybe we put up sneeze guards and those kinds of things. There's not going to be any non-essential travel. We're going to have to deal with special accommodations for vulnerable populations. How are we going to treat immunocompromised people? How are we going to treat workers who are more experienced and older, who could potentially be at greater risk for COVID? Large venues are closed, schools are closed, organized youth activities are closed. That's all phase 1. As we move from phase 1, people starting to come back to work, what's it going to look like in phase 2? Common areas are going to remain closed. We're going to have still social distancing, perhaps less strong than we had in phase 1. Maybe schools can reopen, youth activities can get going again. Maybe you could have some bars open, maybe not like a Friday happy hour, but maybe closer to closing time. People spread out, not quite as many people there. Then we're going to move to phase 3, where venues are going to begin with some social distancing. Pretty much can be back to work, maybe with different hours, with some moderate social distancing in place. So it's not quite back to work yet, like it was before, but we're getting closer. And then, you know, hopefully in the not very distant future, we'll be able to work. FEMA and CDC and OSHA and EEOC have come out with some official guidance or some leaked guidance. You know, one of the things that FEMA and CDC are talking about is having, you know, sometimes you see in restaurants the A, B, or C rating for cleanliness, maybe doing some sort of certification so that a customer could be assured that if they're going into a place of business that they're taking these issues very seriously. There's been some talk about maybe retraining municipal inspectors and things like that to be social distancing police, to provide some sort of guarantee that businesses continue to do what they should be doing in terms of social distancing, cleaning and disinfection, worker safety, and things like that. So that's sort of the known category. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of good products coming out. But then, you know, there's a lot of the known unknowns. What do we need? And, you know, as the business community, we haven't seen a lot of answers yet. We trust we're going to be part of the solution here, but we're going to need some guidance from the federal government and perhaps from states on general health screening. Most businesses don't have the capacity to deal with these kinds of issues. We're going to need some help. We're going to need a clear role on employers in terms of testing, contact tracing, dealing with PPE, and all of those kinds of issues. And we're going to need some help in terms of, for businesses to bring their workers back. We're going to need mass transit in place. We're going to need childcare in place. And we're going to be relying on the federal and the state government to make sure that those operations can continue in a safe way. We're also going to have to deal with, as businesses, health privacy and lots of other issues. The legal and regulatory and liability sort of certainty. We're going to need help here. HIPAA. We're not allowed to talk about health conditions that our employees may have, but we're going to need to deal with that in terms of contact tracing. If one of our employees is tested positive for COVID, we're going to need to be able to tell other employees who have perhaps come in contact with that person, and we're going to need the government and Congress to act in that area to make sure that we as employers are protected. Discrimination claims. We're going to have to treat different workers differently, whether they're elderly, older, immunocompromised. We're going to have to make sure that we're providing different accommodations for different workers and providing them in a reasonable manner. And we're going to need to be protected that we're not sued for it later on. We're going to need to deal with OSHA requirements. There's one of the things that we're very concerned with is there's a lot of talk, particularly on the House side, about command and control style regulation. Now, look, we need to do what we can to make sure that we're treating our workers in a safe way, that workplaces are safe. But going from the voluntary guidance and the really, really good cooperative guidance that we've seen coming out of lots of agencies is really, really important. Turning that to command and control, where all your desks are in the four corners of the room, but there's only 5 feet 11 inches of separation, and we're going to ding you. That, you know, those are issues that we're very, very concerned with. Independent contractors. One of the definitions of an independent contractor is where that contractor gets their supplies. So if we as business owners are giving PPE to our independent contractors, does that turn them into employees and a different liability and regulatory regime? So these are some of the questions that we need answers to, and are going to be working with our federal regulators on. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce has stood up several different task forces in this area to start to learn from companies that have some really good best practices in place, understand some of the problems that they have. One of the task forces we have is with the heads of the state chambers from across the country working together, because we know that the nexus of what the states are doing, what local governments are doing, and what the federal government is doing is very, very important. And reducing obstacles and reducing different standards across different levels of government is going to be important. earlier this week, the U.S. Chamber and the Council of State Chambers sent a letter to mayors, governors, Congress, the president, urging harmonization of these different standards as quickly and expeditiously as possible. That's one of the big takeaways right away. And as the weeks go on, we're going to hopefully have some more concrete information that we can continue to share. So maybe with that, I'll turn it over for questions. But two things: I've got my background here. Maybe if I can show you, this is my son doing a wheelie on his bicycle, and hopefully a 50-year-old guy can learn to do a wheelie on his mountain bike. And again, I just want to say thank you. As you were talking about, Chris, you guys are a 5-star accredited chamber. That is hugely important for business leaders like you, the business community in your region, the leadership role that you're playing in terms of standing up for your business community, getting this dialogue happening, sharing these resources. We in Washington at the U.S. Chamber want to be your advocate and support the good work that you're doing. It's really, really important. We're all in this together. So we're your eyes and ears in Washington and want to support and help you in any way that we can. So thanks.
That's great, Ron. Now, you talked about the unknown unknowns, and some of those that I hear about are, some of the larger companies are prohibiting any gatherings of more than 50 through July of 2021. Do you think that's going to build up steam? I mean, is that, and then I got a couple others I wanted to follow up with before we move to the chat Q&A.
So, I'll be honest, I don't know. We're sort of stuck in a paradox here. I was on a call yesterday with a company, and they're like, in terms of reopening, there's no prize for winning this race. And many companies are going to be reluctant to sort of be that first. There are some states, Georgia, Texas, Colorado, that are dipping their toe into this space. I think that we will have some lessons that we can learn from there. But I was also listening to a company that's really big in the events space, like concerts, big trade shows, that kind of thing. And they were sort of talking about, the 400 steps in their plan to make sure that people are protected when they come to these larger events. So, I think that on the one hand, businesses are still dealing with the uncertainty and they don't know what to do. And on the other hand, I think where the hope that we have is that we're starting to work through this together. One of the things I learned yesterday is that weather.com has got a really good COVID tracker. I haven't had a chance to actually look at it yet, but go to weather.com. If you've got operations all over. I'm sorry?
So we'll post that down the bottom, weather.com. And there's a COVID tracker in terms of where it's moving and the numbers?
Yeah. And if you've got a big problem in this county, opening your bank branches there maybe doesn't make sense. But if you're in lots of other areas, maybe you can. So there's going to be lots of tools. Look, we're entrepreneurs. We're really smart. We're going to come up with some really creative solutions that's hopefully going to help us address a lot of these problems.
People were talking about the governments and the politics of opening early, and you can see a lot of what's going on across the country. And interestingly, it's private business like Marriott and Disney that many people have more faith in terms of not going too fast and making the right judgment to balance liability to safety, because they have a lot more long-term at risk. And I know both of those are members of the U.S. Chamber. Are they involved in this dialogue? And will that be part of, say, a toolbox that is put out by the U.S. Chamber for local companies?
I would expect that they would. And, so I'm running one of the groups in this area, and my group is called Consumer Facing. I have no idea what that means, but we've got companies in the space who are, sort of gig economy workers. We have, transportation and logistics, package delivery, financial services, the banks, the insurance companies. We've got people from across all the different spectrums of the economy who are contributing. And, it's been sort of very interesting to see how one of the companies I was listening with was Amway. They've got a lot of workers, but they don't have a lot of customers coming into their offices and what they're doing. And then you hear from some companies that have a lot of customers coming in and lessons that both sides are starting to share. So, we've been talking about, we're working on what's inside the box at this point. We're not sure what the wrapping paper is going to look like. So we've got some products. We're going to have some doodads. The biggest takeaway was that letter to the governors and the mayors talking about harmonization of systems. We're going to have some information come out quickly. Some is going to take some more, but yeah, we're going to have tools that we're going to be able to share widely. And then, me or someone else or Steve are going to come back in a couple of weeks and share more on that front.
Yeah, Steve McAllister is our New England representative, just so folks know, and he's out of province. He was on the call last week briefly and gave an update. He's fantastic. We're really lucky to have him here. So on, right from the week one, the U.S. Chamber came out with toolboxes from the, toolbox of helpful data and guidance in terms of, accessing the PPP and the EIDL, and then laying people off, and then different aspects. It's been really terrific to have that business perspective on things and then have examples to follow. So another question we had last week was OSHA. OSHA really represents the federal government. They represent us as taxpayers, but they seem to kind of sometimes run into us in terms of our workplace. And of course, you mentioned some of the best practices that might come along, but then enforceable action and whether that's helpful or not at this time, or whether, can you comment on that? Are you in contact with OSHA? What do you expect we're going to see from OSHA? Is it going to be guidelines, or is it going to be enforcements?
Yeah, I don't know. And that's one of the things that I think is going to be really important. So let's look back to 2001 and 2008. There were big crises, and Congress, in the immediate aftermath, did some legislation to address the crisis in the short term. Then they moved on to recovery legislation. Clearly, there's going to need to be, OSHA, CDC, all the different parts of the government are going to end up with some sort of role in how we address return to work, keeping our employees, our customers, and our communities safe, and those kinds of things. For us, issue number one is going to make sure that we are strong on the liability front. Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, spoke earlier in the week, and the Senate comes back next week, that liability protection is going to be a really big deal. But whether it's OSHA, whether it's the trial bar, there's lots of concerns with how we're going to look. We're going to be going back to work in many places before Congress acts, and we're going to have to trust that we're doing everything right, and we're going to have to rely in many cases that we're doing the right thing. And we're going to need the government to protect us from frivolous lawsuits. Bad companies doing bad things, you should be sued. Companies that are trying to do everything right in the absence of concrete standards are going to need a lot of protection there. And that is where we are going to be focusing a lot of attention as these next bills come out of Congress. And the rub with OSHA is going to be a big one. I completely understand when you talk about making sure that there's standards. There's going to be a big push for enforceable standards. Where that makes sense, that will make sense. But we're going to need to make sure that we're dealing with common sense, that workplaces are going to be able to get back to work, because we're not going to be able to reinvent the entirety of the American workplace in the wake of COVID to go back to work. So does that kind of answer it? I'm kind of getting on a rant here.
Yeah. I think what we hear is the U.S. Chamber is kind of on a parallel path to try to advocate for and defend against, practices that are going to truly be beneficial to the consumer and the employee and the employer, and not get too weighted onto one side. and have a bad experience trying to implement that with, and we've seen examples of that here. We used to have a toxic use reduction institute that was given, punitive powers, and they'd come in and check your Barbasol in your hair salon. And if it was too rich or not diluted enough, they'd issue a $500 fine to a hair salon. And they'd come into a city and they'd spend a week here and rack up, $40,000, $50,000 in fines for cleaning product and all that. We understand that it was in everybody's best interest, but is that the best way to implement it? No, actually the teeth were taken away from them 2 years later. They still exist, but now they do education grants and whatnot. And I would say from the business perspective and from everybody's perspective, it's a better implementation of that particular example. And I think OSHA and this is going to be probably something similar. So what I'm confident that the U.S. Chamber will issue a toolbox that we can make available to our members, which will have some great, even like, restaurants where it's like this table left, empty intentionally, for public, so, just kind of nice signs and things that kind of convey safety and efficiency so that each business doesn't have to come up with it on their own.
Yeah, and I want to give another shout out to Eli and SBA and all of his colleagues who are working throughout the federal government. I don't think like OSHA is coming in with a target on business at this point. But when you create a regulatory program and then you require enforcers to go enforce that program, enforcers have to do their job, and that's why getting this right is going to be so important. And that's why, and some of the things that we've been thinking about is, keep this as a temporary program through the end of the year or something like that. Bake liability protection into it in the beginning, and make sure that we're dealing with COVID-related stuff, not other unrelated issues. So yeah, we're going to be working on tools, and we're going to be working on, making sure that legislation and regulation in this area is as smart as possible.
Great. Thank you, Ron. So I'm going to go into a couple of the questions we have here. One here is, I work for a lender, and we understand that part. We are being approached by a company and a CPA who have assisted our borrowers, and they want their fees to be reimbursed by the SBA. Is SBA reimbursing accountants' fees to help fill out the PPP? I think that might be Susan or Eli.
Chris, I can answer that. So under the FAQs that were published on the Treasury's website, and I just, I just want folks to really, familiarize themselves with two websites to get correct information about the Paycheck Protection Loan Program. So one is home.treasury.gov/cares, like the CARES Act. The other one is SBA's website, which is sba.gov/paycheck protection. So on those two websites, you're going to find the most current information about the program. Now, on the FAQs on the Treasury's website, it did say that an individual who helps the small business applicant complete the application has the, can ask for an agent fee, and that agent fee is up to 1%. However, the bank needed notification with the submission of the application. So if that agent did not tell the lender that there is an agent involved with this application, they have absolutely no right to request the agent fee after the fact. Okay. However, if they disclose that, or the borrower disclose that we have an agent involved with this process, that agent could have been an employee of the business too. Okay. So the Treasury guideline does give, we had a CFO of a business that filled out the application, the paperwork. They told the lender that they are the agent on this loan. Although it benefited his company, they were entitled to the agent fee. But
they take that 1% from the bank's percentage? That's
correct. So they cannot charge the borrower, okay? They have to, the lender has to pay that fee.
So is there a section on the PPP that application that says I am filling this out and I'm asking for the 1%?
There is no section on the application itself. So that's where the confusion comes from. Okay, our regular application, our Form 1919 for 7A loans, for express loans, for, we've got a special form for 504s that asks the question. This program, as you know it was really, it was last minute, it was sort of rushed, and we came up with the documentation, within 24-hour notice. So that part was missed on the application, but that's guidance that we have available. We've made the lenders aware of it, and folks need to know that if they do have an agent and they did not disclose it to the bank, that they can pay them themselves. A small business owner can pay the agent themselves, but it does not come out of the lender fee.
That's very helpful, I think, in two ways. One is that the CFO, as you say, or a CPA can get compensated as long as they make it known when they submit the application to the bank and the bank acknowledges it. But secondly, it prevents the alternative, which is after the money is received from the company, then an invoice is submitted, and then that becomes not forgivable. A portion, and that might not have been anticipated by the business. So thank you for clarifying that, and we will post the Treasury's website for folks to be able to access that. There's another one here. Does an employer who works, say, 7 p.m. to 1 a.m. qualify for childcare pay if the wife is working from home and the childcare facility is closed? That's an interesting question. So it sounds like in this case, dad is taking care of the child, maybe while the mother or the husband is maybe a healthcare worker or
yeah, that would not be eligible actually. So there is a section on the the internal final rule that deals with that topic specifically. So I can send that to you, and you can perhaps post it on the website, but that would be eligible.
Thank you. I'm going to run through a couple more of these before we conclude. But in the beginning, they made it sound like the loan forgiveness was not income, and the expenses paid by the loan would be deductible. Is this true? So in the beginning, they made it sound like the loan forgiveness was not income, and that the expenses paid by the loan would be deductible.
I think I understand what the question is. So with loan forgiveness, usually there is a debt cancellation form at the end of the year. A 1095-C form is issued that cancels that debt and does not make the recipient of the grant or the funds taxable income. I think that's what the question is. So the intent of the CARES Act was not to tax people, for this money. But there has been absolutely no guidance from the Treasury or the IRS as far as what the treatment of the loan forgiveness is going to be from a tax perspective.
So we expect that will come out pretty soon and will be on that Treasury website, I would think.
I would say that guidance should come out in the next couple of weeks. Just so everybody knows, a bank can request a forgiveness on a PPP loan 7 weeks after disbursement. So let's not forget, some of these loans were approved early in April, the 3rd and the 4th of April. So they're already in the third week of their payroll, the forgiven covered period, basically those 8 weeks. So they're already in the third week of the covered period. So
okay,
pretty soon,
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to ask this one. This is kind of a jump ball, and we'll conclude with this and not get too far down into this. But here we don't have many counties in the state anymore, but Plymouth County was our first, and it is a larger county with over 500,000 people. They took the initiative to fill out the application for federal funding from the U.S. government in the face of COVID, and they received, as a result themselves, this Plymouth County that we're in, $90 million for COVID recovery. Let's see, any thoughts on manage across the county? So now the governor is asking, I guess, for that money to come to the state, and the state will administer it. I can see there's points on both sides of this, really, because of the way it was set up and the way we don't have very many counties, and we have very few counties that would qualify at 500,000 people. But they did take the initiative and they did get it. And 90 million, is less than building a new school in many communities. But on the other hand, there was a question, and I don't know who this is for, either Ron or Eli, I think, and the state folks can jump in if they want. Is that 90 million taken away from what the state would have gotten otherwise? We don't know. Any thoughts on this, or what's going to happen with it?
I'll be honest, I don't know. I would guess not, but I really don't know. Yeah, I'm staying out of that one.
Okay, all right. It is one of those.
The Massachusetts Chamber on that one.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Chris, I'm happy to check in on that for you too. That isn't something that Susan or I have been updated on, but always glad to take the question, and when we don't have the answers, and work internally with you.
Okay. All right. See, that sounds like going to be a punt maybe on that one. I want to thank the panelists. They answered, I think, 19 questions directly to folks. That's just I think that's a record we've got so far. So thank you very much for doing that, and it's in writing so people can have that and they can discuss it with whoever they're asking it for or whatever they're trying to pursue. So that's wonderful. I want to thank you all. Ron, thank you for taking the time to be with us today. Really appreciate it. Susan and Eli and Margaret, of course. I think the mayor has already left us to jump to his next call. But I want to thank all of you too who are in the community. Please stay safe. Enjoy the weekend. It's supposed to be 70 degrees and sunny. So, of course, get out there, enjoy, maybe do a few wheelies on your son's bike, or however you want to do it. Be careful. 50, I don't know. You got to be careful. You break something. I'm there with you. So thank you very much, folks. Next week, we have, we're in dialogues with Senator, one of our U.S. senators to be our speaker. We also have reached out to Congressman Lynch's office and Senate President Spilka. So we hope to have one of them with us next week. We hope you will all join us back here. And again, thank you all very, very much. Have a good night.
Thanks, Chris.
Have a nice weekend, everyone.
Take care.
You too, everybody.